All stories are dramatized recreations. Named locations are fictionalized. Any resemblance to real persons is coincidental.
Hi, I'm Emily, a 33-year-old pharmacist from SA. Sharing this is hard, but I need to process how my husband David's affair with a colleague shattered our 10-year marriage. It began when I discovered lipstick on his collar, a shade I never wore. That same week, he worked late free nights while Sarah from his finance team answered his phone at 10 p.m. The final blow? Finding hotel points for a seaside inn near Monterey, a place we'd planned to visit for our anniversary. I stood in our empty kitchen holding that confirmation email, the Pacific twilight bleeding through the windows. My hands shook like they did during my first IV compounding exam. That scarlet smear on white cotton became a Rorschach test. Suddenly, every business trip, every guy's night, was a lie. The foundation of our life cracked like a dropped prescription vial. The pills rattled in their amber bottles like tiny accusations. Monday's inventory stretched before me. Hydrocodone counts, insulin logs, the relentless precision that usually calmed me. Today, it felt like performing surgery on myself. David's confession still echoed. It didn't mean anything, as sterile as the laminar flow hood where I prepared chemotherapy drugs. My wedding band caught the light as I scanned barcodes, a flash of gold against a safety green counter. How many prescriptions had I filled for DDS this year? I could calculate the exact percentage down to the decimal, but never saw my own marriage dissolving. A customer approached. Mrs. Gable with her weekly warfarin refill. "You look peaky, dear," she clucked, pushing caramel candies across the counter, her ritual since my residency days. I focused on her interlevels blinking on screen. 3-2 stable. Unlike my pulse thrumming, liar, 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 beneath my scrubs. "Just tired," I murmured, sliding the blister packs into a bag. Her knotted fingers brushed my papery skin, mapping 80 years of survival. "Men are like bad prescriptions," she whispered suddenly. "Sometimes you gotta flush 'em and start fresh." The bell jingled as she left, leaving me gripping the counter's cold edge. Back in a sterile compounding room, I measured morphine sulfate milligram by exact milligram. Precision was armor. David's voice on last night's call, "Can we talk?" dissolved into the whir of the ventilation system. I pictured Sarah from his office, 26, laugh lines unearned by real pain. Did she know he stole my grandmother's sapphire earrings for her birthday? The ones he swore were lost during the remodel? The Pyxis machine beeped, a sound usually sharp and clear, now muffled as if underwater. When Carlos, our head tech, brought contaminated vials for disposal, I startled like a sleepwalker. "Whoa, you okay?" His brow furrowed under the fluorescent glare. The concern in his eyes was almost worse than pity. "Fine," I said too quickly, gloved hands sealing biohazard bags. "Just dousing my life in metaphorical bleach." He lingered, awkward, kind, before retreating. Alone again, I pressed my forehead to the cool stainless steel. The scent of alcohol wipes burned my throat. Closing time. I sat in my Honda, keys dangling drive home to David's rehearsed remorse or the dashboard clock glowed 8,047 p.m. Their hotel reservation flashed in my mind. Monterey, king bed, ocean view. My fingers found the emergency Xanax in my purse, the prescription I'd written myself last week. Outside, palm trees thrashed in a Santa Ana wind. I counted breaths like pill capsules. 1, 2, 3 until the child lock light blinked off. Then I drove nowhere. Just highway and taillights weeding red down the 405. When had we last kissed without calculation? Not since the miscarriage 2 years ago. That hollow season when we moved through rooms like ghosts haunting each other. Now, this. The radio played jazz, his music, and I stabbed it silent. Rain smeared the windshield. Funny how betrayal strips everything to its chemical components. Dopamine withdrawal, cortisol spike, the bitter aftertaste of what now? At a stoplight, my phone lit up, David's face smiling from our Yosemite trip. I let it ring into voicemail. Through the fobbed window, a billboard advertised Couples Therapy Rebuild Trust in cheerful turquoise letters. A laugh escaped me, sharp as breaking glass. Trust, like those childproof caps that crack under pressure. The light turned green. I kept driving past our exit, past the CVS where he bought condoms I'd never seen. Mile after mile, the road humming beneath me like a held breath. The garage light flickered, that burnt-out bulb David kept forgetting to replace as I killed the engine. Silence rushed in, thick as syrup. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner and microwaved lasagna. His attempt at domesticity. I found him hunched at the kitchen island, fork hovering over a plastic container. The sight of his familiar flannel shirt, the one I'd washed 100 times, sent acid up my throat. "Where were you?" His voice scraped raw. I called 12 times. Driving. I didn't remove my coat. The Monterey hotel receipt lay between us like a live wire. its crisp edges illuminated by the under-cabinet lighting. He followed my gaze, shoulders tensing. I can explain. Explain? The word tasted metallic. Sarah's favorite lipstick. Revlon Fire and Ice, Section 7, Aisle 3, 999. I watched his knuckles whiten around the fork. How many meals had I packed in those containers? How many nights waiting? The digital clock on the oven blinked 10,022, her answering his bone at 10. He pushed the lasagna away. It wasn't planned. The conference got stressful. Stressful? I echoed flatly. Rain lashed the window above the sink. Like when I miscarried? Or when Mom died? Did stress make you fuck her in our anniversary hotel? The slap of his palm on granite cracked through the room. Stop. His eyes were bloodshot remorse or exhaustion. I couldn't tell anymore. The sapphire earrings haunted me, Grandma's hands trembling as she gave me the velvet box. You took them. For her. He flinched. I'll get them back. They're contaminated. The pharmacist's precision sliced through me. Sterilization protocols breached. Compromised integrity. I yanked open the junk drawer, tangled chargers, expired coupons, and pulled out his spare keys. Leave. Tonight. Emily. Now. The word left no room for negotiation. Sterile as a sealed vial. He moved like a sleepwalker duffel bag, toothbrush, the shaving kit I bought him last Christmas. At the doorway, he paused. I never wanted to hurt you. The lie hung between us, sour as spoiled milk. I said nothing, just watched his taillights dissolve into the wet street. Alone, the house breathed differently. The hum of the refrigerator. The drip from the guest bathroom faucet. He promised to fix it. I methodically emptied his lasagna into the trash, scoured the container. Boiled water for tea I wouldn't drink. In our bedroom, his pillow still held the dent of his head. I stripped the sheets, harsh, efficient motions, and froze. There, tangled in a fitted sheet, a single long blonde hair. Not mine. My chest tightened, not with tears, but with a chilling clarity. I bagged it like biohazard waste. The guest room smelled of dust and forgotten suitcases. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at cracks in the ceiling plaster. 10 years. The number echoed, prescriptions filled, mortgage payments made, anniversary celebrated with increasingly expensive wine. Had he thought of me when he checked into that seaside room? When he unzipped her dress? My phone buzzed. A 2 a.m. notification. Sarah's Instagram update. A blurry club photo. Champagne flutes raised. David's hand visible on her waist. I threw the phone against the wall. The screen spiderwebbed, light guttering out. Rain softened to drizzle. Somewhere, a siren wailed. Law's constant lament. I counted ceiling tiles until dawn leaked through the blinds. 14 tiles. 14 years since our first date at that terrible sushi place where he'd nervously spilled soy sauce on my coat. I'd laughed. He'd blushed. When did we stop laughing? At 5 a.m. I stood under a scalding shower. Scrubbed until my skin burned pink. The steam couldn't erase the images. David's head thrown back in laughter with her, his fingers tracing patterns on her thigh. I dressed in yesterday's scrubs. Drank black coffee standing at the sink. The rising sun caught the fractured phone screen on the floor. My reflection stared back, shattered into a dozen Emilys. One weeping, one furious. One terrifyingly empty. I swept the shards into a dustpan, each tinkling piece a tiny requiem. Empty hangers clattered in David's closet like bones. I boxed his forgotten ties, the burgundy one he wore at our courthouse wedding, the hideous neon strip from that Vegas conference. My hands moved mechanically, folding fabric that still held his cedar cologne. Sterilization protocol, remove contaminated materials. The pharmacy became my bunker. Carlos slid a chai latte across the counter Tuesday morning, steam curling like a question mark. Rough night, divorce paperwork? The words felt foreign, clinical. I gestured to the waiting bin of antibiotic scripts. Let's tackle the amoxicillin first. At lunch, I avoided the staff lounge, still smelling his surprise deli sandwiches, and sat on the loading dock instead. Sunlight glared off the dumpster. My phone buzzed. David's lawyer. Mediation scheduled. I bit into an apple, tart juice flooding my mouth. How many marital assets to liquefy? Our savings account flashed in my mind, numbers neatly aligned like pill bottles. Mrs. Gable arrived early. Heard about David? She patted my hand, her paper-thin skin mapping veins like river deltas. My herald ran off with a Zumba instructor in 82. Best weight I ever lost. She dropped 3 caramel candies into my palm. Sugar helps. Temporary, but helps. The compounding room offered cold solace. Preparing a fentanyl drip for hospice, I measured micrograms with glacial focus. Precision equals control. David's voice haunted the laminar flow hood's hum. You're always so clinical, Em. Was it clinical to notice he'd taken the good coffee maker but left our wedding album? Thursday brought Sarah. She materialized at drop-off counter, 3 oversized sunglasses swallowing her face. Prescription for Ativan. Her voice trembled as she slid the script toward Carlos. Dr. Evans, David's golf buddy. My gloved hand froze mid-reach for the blood pressure cuff. "I'd please." Carlos remained professionally neutral. She fumbled in her purse, a designer leather tote David couldn't afford. When her license emerged, I saw it, Grandma's sapphire stud winking from her earlobe. Contaminated artifacts. Acid rose in my throat. "Wait times 20 minutes, Carlos stated. As she slumped to the waiting chairs, I counted controlled substance logs with savage precision. Diazepam, oxycodone, lorazepam. Her reflection warped in the anti-theft mirrors, a blonde smear against the osteoporosis supplements display. When Carlos called her name, I intercepted the vial. "Sarah?" My voice didn't waver. Counseling recommendations printed on the label. Highly advised for anxiety related to interpersonal trauma. Her knuckles whitened around the bag. The sapphires glinted. Grandma's hands polishing them every Sunday. She fled without her receipt. That night, I attacked the garage. David's camping gear dusty relics from our Joshua Tree stargazing trips went into donation piles. Beneath a moldy sleeping bag, I found it. My old pharmacology textbook from USK. Its spine cracked open to chapter 14, Chemical Bonds. A faded coffee ring stained the margin where he'd written "Marry Me." During all-night study sessions, rain drummed the roof as I ripped out the page. Flames curled the paper in the steel sink, blue-orange tongues devouring his handwriting. Ash swirled like gray snow. Sleep came in jagged fragments. The guest room clock ticked like a metronome. 31:08 a.m. Sarah's Instagram flashed behind my eyelids, David's hand possessive on her hip. I stumbled to the kitchen, gulping water straight from the tap. Moonlight caught the empty space where our fruit bowl once sat. He took the goddamn bowl. Friday's dawn bled pink over the San Gabriels. I dressed slowly, navy scrubs instead of the teal he loved. At the pharmacy, Carlos nodded at the massive floral arrangement on consult desk 2. "Delivery for you, no card." Stargazer lilies, David's signature apology flowers. Their cloying sweetness choked the sterile air. Without breaking stride, I carried them to the hazardous waste bin. Gloves snapped on. Biohazard protocol initiated. "Wrong department," I told the bewildered courier. "Try the morgue." Mornings now followed a strict algorithm. Alarm at 5:45 a.m., 12 minutes of yoga on the guest room floor, black coffee brewed in a French press David hated. No more compromises. The silence felt less like absence and more like calibration, adjusting the pH of my life back to neutral. At work, I volunteered for extra compounding shifts. The laminar flow hoods was white noise for my thoughts. Wednesday, I prepped pediatric chemo doses. Tiny syringes of hope measured to the microliter. Precision as penance. Carlos eyed me over the IV bags. "You've logged 60 hours this week. M. Trial runs for insomnia," I deflected, labeling a bag of saline. "The truth?" Empty rooms echoed louder than Pixis alarms. Then he walked in 3 p.m., just as the sun slanted through the drive-through window. Tall, salt and pepper hair, a faded NASA t-shirt under his open flannel. "James Chen," he introduced himself at pickup, flighting his license across the counter. Testosterone, refill. His voice was calm grounded, like good soil. I scanned his profile, 38, aerospace engineer, clean history. "Dosing schedule unchanged?" "Same protocol." He smiled faintly, keeping my rockets and hormones stable. A joke, simple, human. My glutes crinkled as I handed him the vial. His fingers brushed mine, no static shock, just warmth. David would have made a snide remark about needle junkies. James simply nodded. "Appreciate the care." As he left, Mrs. Gable materialized beside me, smelling of lavender and intrigue. "New neighbor," she whispered conspiratorially. Moved into the Craftsman on Elm. Divorced. Quiet. She dropped 2 caramels into my scrub pocket. Better than Ativan. That night, purging David's final drawer, I found it. Tucked behind expired passports, a ticket stub from our first Dodgers game. June 12, 2014. Extra innings. He'd kissed me when Turner hit the walk-off, beer foam on his lip. The memory didn't slice anymore, it pressed like a bruise. I flicked the stub into the shredder. The machine snarled, spitting confetti into the recycling bin. Biodegradable nostalgia. Sleep came easier until 2 a.m. when David's number flashed on my blocked caller log. I stared at the ceiling, counting respirations. Inhale, 4 seconds. Exhale, 6. The guest room wall seemed closer tonight. I rose, brewing tea at the moonlit kitchen sink. Outside, James's house glowed. One window lit upstairs. A silhouette moved behind the blinds. Working late, I guessed, or healing. We were all orbiting our private voids. Friday brought Sarah again. She lurked near the Otzi aisle, avoiding my counter. When Carlos called her name for Xanax refills, I intercepted. "Counseling compliance affects refill eligibility," I stated coldly. Her eyes darted to my bare ring finger. He left you too, huh? The triumph in her whisper was cheaper than store-brand aspirin. Correction, I said, snapping her bag shut. I ejected the contaminant. Driving home, I detoured past the ocean. Sunset bled gold onto the Pacific, surfers carving waves like cursive. I parked, walking barefoot on damp sand. A figure knelt ahead, James, sketching in a notebook. He glanced up as my shadow fell across his page, intricate engine schematics. Pharmacist Emily, he recognized. Escaping the Petri dish, prescription for perspective. The waves hushed between us. He didn't ask why I stood too far from the water. Didn't probe. Just offered a stick of gum, spearmint, clinical, and kind. David called as I unlocked my door. I silenced it, watching James's light flick on across the street. His shadow bent over a workbench through the garage window. Methodical, focused. I opened Mrs. Gable's caramels, letting sweetness dissolve on my tongue. For the first time in months, I didn't taste lies. The mediation room smelled of cheap coffee and cheaper regrets. David's knee bounced under the laminate table, a nervous tick I'd once found endearing. Now it pulsed, like a faulty IV pump. His lawyer slid papers across the table, division of marital assets. I traced the line item for our Monterey timeshare, the one he'd booked for them. Emily keeps the house, David blurted suddenly. His eyes avoided mine, fixed on the dusty faux ficus. I'll sign over equity. His lawyer stiffened. Sarah's influence? Guilt? I didn't care. Accepted, I said, pen scratching like a scalpel. Sterilize the wound. Later, filling Mrs. Gable's Plavix, Carlos murmured, "You look lighter." Divorced a tumor today, I deadpanned. He snorted, nearly dropping the pill counter. James appeared at closing, not for meds, but aspirin. Migraine, he explained, squinting in the fluorescent glare. Stress testing rocket nozzles all day. I scanned his profile again. No NSAIDs contraindications. One files measures Kent-Indexion's pressions. Try caffeine with it, I suggested. Vasoconstrictor, he blinked. You're full of surprises, pharmacist. Rain sheeted down as I locked up. James waited under the awning, NASA hoodie pulled tight. Can I offer a ride? His truck idled at the curb, a vintage Ford with engine schematics peeking from the glove box. The cab smelled of warm metal and spearmint. We didn't speak, just watched wipers slap the downpour. At my driveway, he handed me a graphite-smudged napkin. Pressure calculations, he said sheepishly, for your migraines. Inside, I smoothed the equations beside my compounding notes. Fluid dynamics. David could barely calculate tip percentages. Saturday's garage sale exercised ghosts. David's golf clubs, $50. Sarah's sapphire earrings, mailed anonymously, donated to the women's shelter. Mrs. Gable haggled over our fondue pot, slipping caramels into my apron. Healing requires fire, she declared, stuffing bills in my palm. James materialized as I priced the espresso machine. Housewarming upgrade? He examined the portafilter like a fuel valve. Divorce downgrade? He bought it for $20, then lingered, tracing a dent in our patio table. This where he told you? The question hung like mist. Kitchen counter, wrong coordinates. His gaze held mine steady. No pity. Anyone who'd choose orbit over your gravity is bad at physics. I sold the table to a newlywed couple. Monday brought Sarah's final prescription, and David. They huddled at Otsuke cough syrups, his hand possessive on her waist. Our waist. Carlos bristled beside me. Want me to handle it? Contamination protocol, I said evenly. Isolate and contain. David approached alone. Counter 3 for pickups, I clipped. He flinched. We're expecting, Sarah's. The words dissolved into pharmaceutical hum. Expecting. The baby we'd lost, his choked sob in the, flashed behind my eyes. My gloved hand steadied on the counter. Congratulations. I recommend prenatal vitamins. Aisle 4. Sarah's triumphant smile crumpled when I rang up her Sofran. Morning sickness? I asked, professional as steel. Side effects include guilt-induced insomnia. Highly prevalent. She fled. David hesitated, mouth working soundlessly. The bell jingled behind him like a death knell. That night, I uncorked the wine David hated Petite Sarah, bold and unsweetened. Through the kitchen window, James's garage glowed. On impulse, I texted the napkin equation, applied your formula. Headache-free, his reply blinked instantly. Rocket science ex-husband science. Rain cleared to reveal bruised purple twilight. I carried the espresso machine across the street. James answered, grease-streaked, dismantling a carburetor on his workbench. House call? Delivery. I set it down beside a half-built drone. You overpaid. He wiped hands on jeans. Compounded interest. We stood in comfortable silence, breathing in oil and ozone. His workspace was organized chaos. blueprints pinned like abstract art, tools aligned with engineer's precision. No lies hiding in drawers. David's having a baby, I stated. The words didn't fracture me. James stilled. And you? Having Merlot. I pulled the bottle from my tote. Interested in contaminating your clean room? He fetched 2 jelly jars. We drank at the open garage door, watching streetlights flicker on. No grand confessions. Just quiet orbits aligning. When his pinky brushed mine on the workbench, I didn't pull away. The stars emerged, pale at first, then fierce, like hope calibrated to a new frequency. Mornings now tasted different. Dark roast without bitterness, sunlight pooling on the kitchen tiles like liquid gold. I moved my things back to the master bedroom. David's ghost had been evicted, replaced by Esky pharmacology journals stacked where his watch charger once buzzed. On my nightstand, James's pressure calculation napkin lived under a magnifying glass fluid dynamics as bedtime reading. Work became sanctuary. Tuesday, I caught Carlos adjusting the morphine logs, a decimal misplaced. 3rd error this month, I said quietly, pointing to the discrepancy. Sweat beaded his temples. Lydia's chemo bills, he trailed off. I slid my card across the counter. Advance. Repay when you can. His relieved exhale fogged the computer screen. Control isn't about rigidity, I realized. It's about calibrating the dose of compassion. James appeared at lunch, toolbox in hand. Heard your disposals grinding. He knelt under the sink without waiting for permission. I handed him wrenches as Mrs. Gable's voice chirped from my pocket speaker. Men who fix pipes before asking for coffee? Marry him, dear. James's chuckle vibrated through the pipes. Tell Mrs. Gable I prefer tea. David's baby announcement arrived via mail. A glossy gender reveal invite. Team Pink, in curlicue font. Sarah's ultrasound photo paperclipped to it. A grainy bean she now carried where mine had failed. I recycled it with the CVS circulars, but the image flickered behind my eyelids during that afternoon's pediatric vaccinations. A toddler's howl snapped me back. Needle phobia, not heartbreak. I offered a frozen sticker. Elsa makes brave, I whispered. Her tears slowed. Mine didn't start. Rain lashed la that night, monsoon season wrath. My power died at 9 p.m. Through the kitchen window, I saw James's generator humming across the street, his garage glowing like a lighthouse. I hesitated, then texted, grid down. Borrowing photons? He appeared at my door in grease-stained sweats, flashlight beam cutting the dark. Priority rescue for essential personnel. His toolkit clanked as he jury-rigged extension cords from his house. We sat on the living room floor eating cold pesto pasta by flashlight. Shadows danced over grandma's sapphires, now displayed defiantly on my bookshelf. David ever fix anything? James asked, testing a socket. Broken promises, I said. The flashlight caught his smirk. Rockets are simpler. Combustion follows math. He handed me a spare battery pack. People, infinite variables. The lights flickered on suddenly, harsh and revealing. James squinted. Back to reality. Reality's overrated. I didn't move from our patch of floor. He stayed, sketching propulsion equations on my grocery list while I reviewed drug interactions. Comfortable silence, punctuated by rain on the roof, a rhythm syncopated differently than David's restless pacing. Saturday, I spotted them, David and Sarah, arguing outside. Babies are us. She cradled her bump like a shield. He gestured wildly at a parking ticket. I accelerated past, but not before seeing Sarah's smeared mascara. Karma's side effects, nausea, irritability, regret. Mrs. Gable's wisdom echoed, affair babies grow into affair teenagers. At the pharmacy, a new crisis, Mrs. Rosen's insulin stolen from her porch. I can't afford another vial, she wept. I inventoried samples, assembling a month's supply. Delivery from now on, I insisted, logging her address. James's truck idled outside as I closed. Coincidence, he claimed, tossing me a helmet. Making house calls? We rode through canyon country twilight bleeding into the chaparral, wind-stripping worries like dead leaves. At Mrs. Rosen's, he fixed her stock window while I explained injection rotations. She pressed honey cake into our hands. You two glow, she declared. James's ears reddened. I didn't correct her. Later, straddling his motorcycle in my driveway, he lingered. Glowing's radioactive decay, you know. Half-life? I challenged. Depends. His thumb brushed honey from my wrist. Stable elements last. Inside, I found David's final voicemail. I'm sorry you couldn't move on. I deleted it, watching James's garage light through the window. His shadow bent over schematics. A man who built things meant to stay airborne. For the first time, I didn't check the locks. Didn't count pills. Just slept dreamlessly until dawn. August heat shimmered off the pharmacy parking lot, turning the asphalt into a mirage. Inside, the ACK hummed a battle hymn against the 105 Grafe off blaze. I was calibrating the insulin fridge when the commotion erupted. A man slamming fists on Carlos's counter, demanding oxycodone with a forged script. "You think I'm stupid?" he snarled, veins bulging. I stepped between them, voice low and steady, the tone I used explaining chemo side effects. "Mr. Delaney, your last fill was Tuesday. Maximum daily dosage is... Don't lecture me, bitch." Spittle hit my scrubs. Carlos reached for the panic button. I shook my head minutely. "De-escalation protocol. Your wife called this morning," I lied smoothly. "Said you forgot lunch." I slid a protein bar across the counter, the kind we kept for diabetic emergencies. His rage faltered. Confusion flickered. He grabbed the bar, muttering curses as he fled. Carlos exhaled. "Since when do you carry Cliff bars?" "Since I learned some addictions are just hunger in disguise. Mrs. Gable's caramels had taught me that." James found me on my break behind the building, leaning against sun-baked stucco. He held out a mission fig from the farmer's market, plump, split open like a wound. "Heard about Delaney. Rumors travel faster than ambulances." I bit into the fig's jeweled flesh. Sweetness bloomed, cutting through adrenaline's metallic aftertaste. "How'd you know?" Mrs. Rosen's niece works billing. His thumb brushed sticky juice from my wrist. "You okay?" The concern didn't chafe. Better than his fist. He smiled, a rare, full thing. "Combat pharmacist. Saturday, I volunteered at the free clinic in East Law." James appeared unannounced, toolbox in hand. "Leaky sink and exam too," he announced, as if HVAC repairs fell under aerospace expertise. We worked in parallel, me triaging asthma inhalers, him whistling off-key to mariachi drifting through open windows. During lulls, he passed me horchata from a street vendor, condensation slick on the cup. "David never volunteered, did he?" James asked, wiping pipe sealant from his knuckles. "Only for golf tournaments." A toddler wailed in my arms, feverish. I calibrated children's Tylenol exact milliliters for 22 pounds. James watched, quiet admiration in his gaze. Not pity. That evening, his garage door stood open, a silent invitation. I brought tamales wrapped in corn husks. He'd mounted Grandma's sapphires in a kinetic sculpture, gemstones orbiting brass planets. "Security system," he joked. "Too ugly to steal." Laughter startled me, deep, unfettered. David hated my snort. We ate on upturned crates, grease staining the schematics beneath. I confessed things that would have made David scoff. My fear of deep water since the miscarriage. How I counted ceiling tiles instead of sheep. James listened, fingers tracing stress fractures in a rocket nozzle. "Grief's a vacuum," he said at last. "Sucks the oxygen from every room." "And you?" "Ex-wife loved Mars rovers more than me." He shrugged. "Turns out I'm terrestrial." Sunday's emergency shattered the peace. Mrs. Gable's panicked call, Harold, her estranged Zumba instructor husband, had collapsed in her garden. I grabbed the emergency kit. James drove. We found Harold supine among wilting roses, clutching his chest. "Took your nitro?" I checked his pulse, thready. Left it in the RV," he gasped. James supported his head while I administered aspirin. "Ambulance 8:12 minutes," he reported, phone wedged on his shoulder. I coached Harold's breathing, in 4, out 6 as James held his hand. Sunset painted Harold's ashen face gold. When paramedics took over, Mrs. Gable pressed caramels into our palms, trembling. "Should have flushed him sooner," she whispered. Back at my house, adrenaline still hummed. James lingered at the door. "You were magnificent. So were you." The distance between us dissolved. His kiss tasted of horchata and sweat. Uncalculated. No performative passion, just quiet alignment. Later, I stood at the bedroom window. His garage light glowed across the street, a steady beacon in the humid dark. David's final text blinked on my silenced phone. "Sarah's water broke." "Ow." I deleted it, watching James's shadow move behind the blinds. He paused, lifted a hand. A salute? A wave? I pressed my palm to the warm glass. The night breathed heavy and alive as crickets sang in the jasmine. September's heat broke overnight, leaving La washed clean and trembling. At work, I prepped flu shots, neat rows of syringes like soldiers awaiting orders. Mrs. Rosen arrived first, rolling up her sleeve with grim resolve. "Do it quick, dear. Harold's home from rehab." Her tattoo, a faded Auschwitz number, peeked beneath cotton. I swabbed her papery skin, voice soft as the alcohol wipe. "Braver than rockets." "Survival's not bravery," she countered. "It's stubbornness." The needle slid in. She didn't flinch. James texted mid-morning. "Orbital debris avoidance maneuver successful. Lunch?" Attached, a photo of his team cheering in mission control coffee cups raised like chalices. I saved it beside Grandma's sapphire sculpture photo. New constellations. The deli sandwich arrived at noon, pastrami on rye, extra pickles, with a nozzle bolt nestled in the wrapper. Spare part, his note read, for your next confrontation. Carlos raised an eyebrow. Engineer quartz, like he builds. Over-engineered, I tucked the bolt into my scrub pocket. Solid, cold, reassuring. David's call came during flu shot rush hour. Sarah's shriek echoed through the phone. Primal, animal, she's crowning. Where's the goddamn epidural? Background chaos, beeping machines, a nurse's calm override. His breath hitched. The same panic he'd had during my miscarriage. Emily, what do I... Page the anesthesiologist I cut in, labeling a shingles vaccine. And David, breathe. Silence. Then the connection died. Mrs. Gable squeezed my arm. Karma's a labor nurse, honey. All teeth. At sunset, I found James at the Griffith Observatory, leaning against his truck. The city sprawled below us, a galaxy of sodium vapor stars. He handed me binoculars. Look, southwest sky. Jupiter hung swollen and amber above the Hollywood sign. Your rocket dodged debris near that? Nearer than David ever got to fatherhood. His shoulder brushed mine. Warmth seeped through my thin cardigan. She was born an hour ago. 6 pounds. Named Haley. The name, Sarah's mother's, stabbed unexpectedly. Haley, the middle name we'd chosen. James's hand covered mine on the binoculars. Breathe, Emily. And I did. Deep gulps of eucalyptus-scented air. The planet's band seemed to pulse. Gravity bends light, he'd once explained, but not time. Later, over lukewarm tacos from a roach coach, he showed me Haley's hospital photo on his phone. A friend's forwarded text. Pink and squalling, swaddled in generic hospital linen. David's exhausted smile in the background. He looks hollow, I observed. Fatherhood's a fuel leak. Burns bright, then sputters. James zoomed in on the bassinet tag. See? Misspelled Haley as Haley. Even the universe mocks them. I laughed. A sharp, startled sound that echoed down the canyon. The last knot unraveled. We hiked to the planetarium dome, its copper skin glowing in dusk. Inside, the celestial projector painted nebulae across the curved ceiling. James lay back on the cool marble floor. Best view in Ma. I joined him, our shoulders aligned like binary stars. Orion's belt glittered above. David hated stars, I murmured. Said they made him feel insignificant. Rockets need darkness to shine, James replied. His pinky linked with mine. Small, deliberate. The projector word, galaxies spinning. I closed my eyes, saw not Sarah's baby or David's betrayal, but the precise angle of Jupiter's moons. Io, Europa, Ganymede. Names as steady as insulin doses. His truck radio played Chopin on the drive-home nocturnes for a city that never slept. At my door, he hesitated. The bolt, keep it, for balance. I pressed it into his palm, folding his fingers over cold metal. I have better ballast now. His kiss was different this time, slow as planetary drift, anchoring me to solid ground. The jasmine by my porch breathed sweetness into the night. When his taillights vanished, I didn't count ceiling tiles. I downloaded a star map instead. October arrived with Santa Ana winds, hot, dry breaths that rattled the palm fronds and stirred forgotten memories. At the pharmacy, flu season crescendoed into chaos. Between shivering teens and sneezing seniors, Carlos and I moved like synchronized swimmers, swabbing, jabbing, bandaging. Mrs. Gable brought pumpkin bread. Harold's moved back in, she announced, dusting powdered sugar off her widow's weeds. Temporary. His Zumba instructor ran off with a chiropractor. She winked. Karma's a revolving door. James appeared mid-morning, NASA cap pulled low. Thrust test got postponed. He slid a thermos across the counter. Chai. Extra cardamom. I sipped, spiced warmth flooding my throat. Sabotaging my caffeine dependency, recalibrating it, his knuckles brushed mine. A shiver ran through me, unrelated to the act. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, David. Haley squirmed in a carrier strapped to his chest, her tiny face puckered like a disgruntled rosebud. Sarah's absence hung unspoken. Ear infection, he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. Amoxicillin, I scanned the script. Doctor. Evans again, dosing's weight-based. Haley's, 11 pounds. He shifted, uncomfortable. The baby whimpered, fists batting air. David jiggled the carrier, a gesture too frantic, too new. Our phantom child echoed in his clumsiness. In the compounding room, I measured the pink suspension precise milliliters for 11 pounds. David's reflection warped in the stainless steel, shadows under his eyes, shoulders slumped under the weight of fatherhood. I remembered his panic in the delivery room, how he'd called me. The bitterness had dissolved, leaving only a strange ache. Not for him, but for the ghosts we'd buried. Here. I handed him the bottle, cool in its amber vial. Shake well, don't stop early. He fumbled with the safety cap. Haley wailed, a piercing sound that silenced the waiting room. She hates car seats, he confessed, desperation cracking his voice. Try warming it with your hands first. The advice slipped out, automatic, conical. Cold startled them. His eyes met mine, grateful, haunted. You always knew the fixes. For a heartbeat, the years collapsed. Then Haley screamed again, shattering the moment. He fled, the door chime ringing like a requiem. James was waiting outside, leaning against his truck. Saw the minivan? His tone held no jealousy, only curiosity. Just a prescription. I leaned into him, the sun-warmed flannel soaking up my weariness. Babies change orbits. He nodded toward the pharmacy. Your gravity's stronger. That weekend, he took me to the Salton Sea, a surreal pilgrimage. We drove through desert-bleached bone white, past date farms and abandoned trailers. The lake glittered toxic blue under the relentless sun, its shores littered with dead tilapia skeletons. Apocalypse practice, James declared, spreading a picnic blanket on cracked earth. We ate persimmons, juice sticky on our fingers. The silence here was absolute, no freeway hum, no pharmacy buzz. Just wind hissing over fish bones and the distant cry of a greba. James sketched the ruins of a 1950s resort paint, peeling like sunburnt skin. Beautiful, isn't it? Terrifying, I admitted, like holding a loaded syringe. Exactly. His graphite smudged the paper. Beauty needs stakes. He pointed to a tilted pier. My parents brought me here. Dad said sinkholes could swallow you whole. He'd never spoken of them, only the engineer's precision, not the boys' fears. They died on the 405, drunk driver. The words hung in the saline air. I touched his wrist, the pulse steady beneath scarred skin. We waded into the warm, briny water. Dead fish crunched underfoot. David would have hated this, I said. David lacked poetry. James scooped up a barnacle-encrusted Coke bottle. See? Ruin makes better art. He handed it to me, sand gritting under my fingernails. The glass had been frosted opaque by decades of sun and salt, a relic of someone's forgotten joy. Back at the truck, I placed the bottle on the dash. It caught the dying light opalescent, transformed. James traced my palm's lifeline with grease-stained fingers. You're not a fixer, Emily. You're a catalyst. The wind rose, whipping sand against the windshield. I thought of Haley's cries, David's hollow eyes, Sarah's absence, of Mrs. Gable's revolving karma and Mrs. Rosen's stubborn survival. As dusk painted the desert violet, James drove us home. The bottle glowed on the dash, a milky moon captured in glass. I held his hand across the gearshift, the desert unspooling behind us. Some fractures, I realized, weren't meant to be mended, only filled with something stronger. November's chill carried the scent of sage and regret through the pharmacy doors. Holiday decorations appeared overnight. Tinsel snaking around prescription bins, plastic turkeys guarding the diabetic supplies. Mrs. Rosen brought honey cake wrapped in wax paper. Harold's walking again, she announced, thumping her cane for emphasis. Still won't fix my sink, though. James arrived as I inventoried controlled substances, frost glinting on his NASA beanie. Nishan scrubbed, he sighed, dropping a foil-wrapped bundle on the counter. But the prototype thruster works. Inside, a miniature rocket nozzle forged from titanium, still warm from his workshop. I cradled it, light yet indestructible. For my next confrontation, paperweight for divorce papers, he corrected. Carlos whistled. Over-engineered romance. Thanksgiving loomed like a diagnostic test. David texted Haley's first turkey. Sarah wants truce. The photo attached, Haley scowling in a pilgrim bonnet, Sarah's forced smile, David's hollow eyes. I deleted it, focusing on the volunteer sign-up sheet for St. Vincent's community dinner. Mrs. Gable's spidery signature topped the list. Bring your engineer, she'd scrawled in margin. Test his gravy stamina. Dawn on Thanksgiving broke crystalline and cold. James's truck idled in my driveway, exhaust mingling with chimney smoke. He loaded industrial soup pots while I stacked pie boxes. Evercarp's turkeys for 300? I asked. Simulated engine failures for Mars landings, he countered, tapping his temple. Same pressure calculus. St. Vincent's basement buzzed with chaotic grace. Long tables stretched like airport runways under fluorescent lights. Carlos manned the gravy boat like a samurai. Mrs. Rosen directed traffic with her cane. James and I were assigned turkey duty slicing breast meat with surgical precision. His forearm brushed mine with each carve, steady and warm. Halfway through service, a commotion erupted at table 12. Harold Gable waved the drone stick like a baton. This turkey's drier than my RV mattress. Mrs. Gable swatted him with a napkin. Then drown it in gravy, you old coot. James leaned close, his breath fogging the stainless steel counter. Their love language, culinary combat. I passed Harold extra gravy thick as crude oil. He winked. Pharmacist knows best. The lull came at 2 p.m. We sat on stacked milk crates behind the kitchen, sharing a dented tin of cranberry sauce. Sunset bled orange through the high windows, painting the steam tables in molten gold. James produced 2 astronaut ice cream packets, freeze-dried Neapolitan. "Survival rations," he said, crumbling the chalky brick into my palm. "David called this morning," I confessed. The pink ice cream melted on my tongue like cotton candy. Wanted Haley's rash cream recommendation. James studied the foil wrapper. "You told him?" "Triple paste. Zinc oxide base." The answer felt clean, clinical, no residue. Babies shouldn't pay for sins. He nodded toward the dining hall where Mrs. Rosen slow danced with Harold to a tinny radio waltz. "Some orbits decay. Some," he gestured at the elderly couple clinging like vines, "achieve stable trajectory." Dusk found us delivering leftovers to shut-ins. Mrs. Chen's apartment smelled of mothballs and star anise. "Too cold for arthritis?" she fretted, rubbing her knuckles. James knelt, adjusting her radiator valve. I portioned turkey into her ancient fridge. "Take pie," she insisted, pressing almond cookies into James's toolbox. The last stop, Sarah. She answered the door in stained sweats, Haley wailing against her shoulder. The apartment reeked of sour milk and exhaustion. "David's working," she mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "Brought food." James offered the insulated bag. Sarah hesitated, then snatched it. Haley's cries pitched higher, raw, ragged. Instinctively, I reached out. "May I?" Surprise flickered across Sarah's face. She relinquished the baby. Haley felt lighter than expected, a bundle of tremors and heat. I cradled her against my scrubs, humming the lullaby I'd rehearsed for the baby we lost. "Hush, little rocket." Her sobs hitched, softened. Sarah stared, slack-jawed. James held out a cookie. Fuel for commanders. Sarah took it, nibbling mechanically. She never stops crying. "Try skin to skin," I suggested, transferring Haley back. "Regulates heartbeat." Back in the truck, James turned the key. "You held her?" The streetlights blinked on amber against indigo. "She's just a variable in an equation," I said quietly. "Not the sum." He drove, one-handed, the other resting on my knee. Through the windshield, Venus glowed above the Hollywood Hills, steady, uncompromised. The titanium nozzle warmed in my pocket. I traced its contours, a trajectory recalibrated, not abandoned. December arrived in a rush of tinsel and tamales, La's version of winter. At the pharmacy, we battled the holiday trifecta, gift-wrap stress rashes, spiked eggnog indigestion, and the great peppermint shortage of 23. Carlos hung mistletoe over the narcotic safe. "For morale," he insisted, dodging my glare. James appeared during the chaos, snowflake decals dusting his truck windshield despite the 72-degree of heat. "Mission Control holiday party," he announced, sliding a foil-wrapped parcel across the counter. "Your presence requested." Inside, a thruster nozzle tree ornament he'd machined from scrap titanium. To replace bad memories with better physics. Mrs. Gable arrived with poinsettias laced with tinsel. "Harold hung Christmas lights," she reported, plucking candy canes from her handbag. "Fell off the ladder. Back in rehab." She dropped a peppermint into the nozzle ornament. Men are like tree toppers, shiny but precarious. The party was held at J. Appel's von Karman Center, a cathedral of engineering where rockets loomed over buffet tables. James introduced me as Dr. Prescription Precision, his palm warm at my lower back. Between Saturn V models, I met Dr. Arroyo, a propulsion specialist whose hands trembled holding a champagne flute. "Essential tremor," she murmured, embarrassing at negotiations. "Propranolol," I suggested softly. "Low dose. Steadies the hands without dulling the mind." Her relieved smile felt like calibrating a perfect IV-drip. David texted as James demoed a lunar rover sim, Haley's first Xmas. "Can you recommend teething gel?" A photo followed, Haley gumming a tangled string of lights. Sarah passed out on the sofa. I replied, "Benzocaine-free. Aisle 7. Namer, James glanced at my screen. "Still their pharmacist? Still their baby." The rover navigated virtual craters on the monitor, steady, uncompromised. We escaped to the Mars yard at midnight, a red sand simulation site under stadium lights. James spread his flannel on the fake bedrock. "Merry Christmas, Emily." The ornament dangled from his fingertips, catching lunar-grade leads. David never deserved your gravity. I pocketed it, the titanium cool against my thigh. Deserving's irrelevant. Physics just is. Christmas Eve dawned humid and green. At work, I prepped emergency kits for homeless shelters, bandages, antiseptics, insulin coolers. Carlos hummed Feliz Navidad while counting narcotics. "You're off early," he noted. "James is taking me somewhere. Better involves mistletoe." He drove us to Descanso Gardens, 12 miles north into proper winter. Fog clung to the camellias as we walked stone paths strung with fairy lights. "Real cold," I breathed, watching vapor plume. James tugged my beanie over my ears. California's apology for no snow. At the Japanese tea house, he produced thermoses of cocoa spiked with cinnamon. We sat on frozen cedar steps, knees touching. My parents' tradition, he confessed. Mom said, gardens remember kindness. He pointed to a black pine bent by decades of wind. See? Trauma becomes architecture. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Haley's, croup, scared. The, wait time flashed in my mind, 4+ hours. I texted back, humidifier. Steam shower. Stay calm. James read over my shoulder. You're their WebMD. She's just a baby in an on Christmas Eve. The titanium ornament weighed heavy in my pocket. Suddenly, Mrs. Gable's ancient Cadillac screeched into the parking lot. She emerged, waving Harold's walker. Found you. Emergency fruitcake delivery. The cake, dense as plutonium, came with a footnote. Harold escaped rehab. Again, we ate cake on the tea house steps, fog swallowing the city lights. Mrs. Gable toasted with cough syrup bottles to broken men and the women who benched them. James's laugh echoed through the camellias. Driving back, we passed Estate Luke's, a glowing hive of holiday despair. Sarah stood outside. Haley swaddled against the damp. James pulled over before I could speak. Go, he said, cutting the engine. I'll wait. Sarah's eyes were wild. They said mild croup, but the wait. I pressed my palm to Haley's forehead. Febrile. Did you steam? Showers broken. Her voice cracked. James materialized with a toolkit. Lead the way. In their cramped bathroom, he jury-rigged the showerhead while I coached steam therapy. Haley's wheeze softened as humidity rose. Sarah slumped against the tiles, watching James's hands. Competent, unhesitating. You fixed it, she whispered. Temporarily, he wiped grease on his jeans. Like most things, back in the truck, James turned up the heat. Happy? Haley's sleeping face glowed in the rearview, peaceful at last. Outcome optimized, I said. The ornament swung from the mirror, refracting streetlights into stars. New Year's Day dawned quiet and rain, washed Law's streets gleaming like wet obsidian. I stood at the pharmacy's compounding counter, calibrating the first insulin vials of January. The holiday chaos had receded, leaving behind the crisp scent of sanitized surfaces and fresh inventory logs. Carlos yawned, stacking flu shot reminders. Resolutions bring hypochondriacs, he predicted. By Friday, we'll diagnose 20 self-identified typhoid cases. James arrived mid-morning, bearing charred croissants and aerospace trade journals. Froster test succeeded, he announced, grease under his fingernails like lunar soil. He slid a schematic across the counter, a fuel injector redesigned using pharmaceutical flow principles I'd suggested. Your viscosity notes fixed our combustion and stability. Mrs. Gable peered over my shoulder, trailing mothball scent. Romance via rocket science, she sighed. Harold only fixed my toaster. Poorly. The quiet shattered at noon. Paramedics wheeled in Mr. Delaney, the oxycodone seeker from summer gray-faced and gasping. Found him seizing near the dumpster, a medic reported. Carlos froze. I snapped into triage. History? Alcoholic hepatitis. Relapsed over holidays. I scanned his vitals on their monitor, BP crashing, pupils pinpricks. Opiate overdose complicated by organ failure. Narcan. 4 milligrams IV push. The words left my lips before conscious thought. As medics worked, I prepped epinephrine precise micrograms, drawn steady despite my pounding heart. Precision under pressure. James's hand briefly squeezed my shoulder, warmed through scrubs, before stepping back to give space. In the hallway later, the lead medic pressed coffee into my hands. You bought him time. The brew tasted burnt, life-saving. He won't thank you, she warned. He didn't thank me for the protein bar either, I replied. James waited by the exit, his silence more comfort than platitudes. David called that evening, voice frayed. Haley's refusing bottles. Sarah's, overwhelmed. The subtext screamed, save us. I pictured their apartment diaper genie overflowing, unwashed bottles littering counters. Try different nipple flow, I instructed, needing tension from my temples. And David, hire help. Can't afford. Then learn. I hung up, the titanium ornament cool against my palm. James found me on the porch swing, tracing constellations through smog-hazed skies. Still their crisis hotline? Still human. Orion's belt glimmered faintly. Some equations need constant recalibration. He sat beside me, our hips aligned, like rocket trajectories. His calloused thumb traced my knuckles, the touch deliberate, unhurried. Let me recalibrate you. Saturday, he drove us to Vasquez Rocks, jagged sandstone thrusting from desert scrub like fossilized lightning. We hiked past Jurassic-era outcrops, no sound but wind whistling through creosote bushes. At the summit, James spread a blanket. My thinking spot, he confessed, where I grieved my parents. Below, the Antelope Valley sprawled, a mosaic of wind farms and wildfire scars. He pointed to a distant ridge. Their crash site. The words hung stark in thin air. I rebuilt engines so failures wouldn't be random. I understood then his precision wasn't control, but reverence. Like my drug calculations, honoring life's fragility through meticulous care. David cheated because he feared randomness, I realized aloud. Our miscarriage terrified him. James handed me a water bottle, condensation beating in cold desert air. Chaos isn't the enemy, it's the catalyst. He nodded toward a red-tailed hawk riding thermals, effortless, adaptive. Like your Narcan intervention, we descended as shadows lengthened. At the trailhead, a park ranger waved us down. Lost hiker, he panted. Diabetic. Last seen near Pinnacle Rock. James grabbed his emergency kit, always in his truck, as I assessed. Age? Insulin type. 72. Lantus and Humalog. We found Mr. Henderson slumped against a boulder, pale and sweating. His glucose meter read F42. Too proud to turn back, he slurred. James supported his head while I administered glucose gel, ruby red syrup smeared on cracked lips. Slow sips, I coached, checking his pulse. Weak, thready. James radioed coordinates while I prepped a glucagon shot. The syringe glinted in late sun hope, measured in milliliters. As the helicopter thundered overhead, Mr. Henderson gripped my wrist. Nurse, pharmacist. His bleary eyes crinkled. Same difference when you're dying. Back at the truck, dusk painted the rocks violet. Adrenaline faded, leaving bone-deep weariness. Jane studied me, dust-streaked scrubs, hair escaping its braid. You're magnificent in triage mode. We're all just patching leaks, I murmured, watching the rescue chopper shrink to a speck. He drove home one-handed, his palm warm on my knee. Through the windshield, Venus burned bright, a constant against the gathering dark. The titanium ornament swung from the mirror, refracting starlight. I closed my eyes, not counting losses but calibrating gains, steady hands, quiet strength. This man who sees chaos as clay, not calamity. January bled into February with skies the color of brushed steel. At the pharmacy, Valentine's displays erupted overnight. Heart-shaped chocolates elbowing antifungal creams, pink teddy bears judging hemorrhoid ointments. Carlos hung a Love Stinks banner over the drive-thru. Anti-commercialism protest, he declared, handing out discount coupons for stress vitamins. James arrived bearing a miniature engine block cast in aluminum. V-twin motorcycle piston, he announced, placing it beside my computer. Valentine's gift. Romantic as a pap smear, I deadpanned, weighing degoxin tablets. Precisely calibrated, he countered. Like us. Mrs. Gable snorted behind the blood pressure cuff. Harold gave me a chia pet. Still in rehab. The call came during the lunch rush. St. Vincent's Shelter needed emergency antibiotics. Strep throat rampaged through their dormitories. I volunteered for delivery, Carlos covering my shift with a solemn salute. Take the combat, pharmacist. James drove through Silver Lake drizzle, wipers slapping rhythm. Remember our first disaster date? He asked. Salt and sea fish carcasses? Still more romantic than David Spancy's Olive Garden proposal. The memory no longer stung, just amused anthropological distance. At the shelter, chaos reigned. Children coughed like broken engines. Volunteers moved with flu-weary dread. Sister Marguerite, a dynamo in a frayed habit, pressed a clipboard into my hands. God sent an angel with amoxicillin. Pharmaceutical logistics, I corrected, already triaging severity, scarlet fever rashes, swollen tonsils, one toddler breathing like a squeaky hinge. Epiglottitis risk. In the makeshift clinic, a converted storage room smelling of bleach and despair, I calibrated doses by flashlight when the power flickered out. James rigged emergency lights using truck batteries and lead strips. Field medicine meets rocket science, he observed, handing me a headlamp. A teenage boy, maybe 15, shivering under a raider's blanket, refused to open his mouth. Scared, Sister Marguerite whispered. Foster kid, trust issues. I knelt, headlamp beam soft. Know what this is? The aluminum piston caught the light in his palm. Motorcycle heart. Made it myself, James offered from the doorway. The boy's eyes widened. School. Cooler than strep throat, I agreed. He opened wide. Later, distributing peanut butter sandwiches, I spotted her Sarah. Hunched in a corner, Haley asleep in a donated stroller. Her designer jeans looked incongruous against peeling linoleum. David's gone, she blurted before I could retreat. Took his bonus and left for Vegas. Haley whimpered, cheeks fever flushed. Sarah's knuckles whitened on the stroller handle. I have 83 and this thing. The word thing hung like surgical steel. Haley's eyes fluttered open, David's exact shade of hazel. My phantom baby stirred, then stilled. Not my equation. Strep's contagious, I stated, pulling gloves on. She needs antibiotics. Sarah flinched as I swabbed Haley's throat. You're helping? Contagion protocol. The rapid test strip blazed positive. I measured cherry-flavored suspension milliliters for 18 pounds. Shake well. Don't skip doses. James appeared with a thermal blanket. Generators overheating. He draped it over Sarah's shoulders. She stared, confused by kindness without agenda. Driving home through rain-slicked streets, James broke the silence. You gave her your last vial. Pediatrics first. Neon signs bled across the windshield, liquor stores, pawn shops, a flashing Love Doctor billboard. She'll need welfare applications, housing lists. You'll send them. Not a question. My apartment felt different warmer, despite the damp. James examined the leaking kitchen faucet while I changed Haley's dosage notes into the shelter's database. Sarah called David's bluff, I realized aloud. Raised the stakes. Gamblers always fold, he murmured, tightening a washer. The aluminum piston sat beside my laptop, cold, precise, beautiful. James's reflection warped in its curves as he worked. He fixes things, I thought. Build them to last. Not like David, who treated relationships like disposable razors. At midnight, rain drumming the roof, he showed me blueprints for a desert cabin, our names handwritten on the foundation sketch. Big Bear Lake, seismic zone 3 but stable bedrock. I traced the bedroom dimensions. Room for a compounding lab? Priorities. He kissed my temple, a grounding point. Later, in bed, his breath warm on my neck, I didn't count tiles. Didn't imagine David's betrayals or Sarah's struggles. Just listened to rain and James's steady heartbeat, a rhythm more reliable than any pharmaceutical timer. Outside, the city hummed its chaotic lullaby. I pressed closer, the aluminum piston cool under my pillow, a talisman not against the past, but for the precision of now. March arrived in a riot of jacaranda blooms, painting the streets in violet haze. At the pharmacy, allergy season collided with tax time stress. Carlos dubbed it Snot and Audit Armageddon. Between Claritin scripts and panic attack interventions, I prepped for my oncology rotation at Cedars, Sinai. Sterile compounding gloves lay beside James's desert cabin blueprints, a Venn diagram of my new life. He appeared at closing, grease-smudged and triumphant. Septic tank's in, he announced, dropping soil cake schematics beside my Pixis logs. Approved for 5-bedroom occupancy or one very determined pharmacist. Mrs. Gable peered over her bifocals. Harold proposed again from rehab. Sent a ring pop via Nurse Ratched. David's final email pinged during inventory. A rambling confession from a Vegas motel. Haley's better off without me. Sarah hates me. You were right. The words felt stale, like expired antibiotics. I archived it under contaminated samples. Saturday's free clinic in Boyle Heights buzzed with pre-dawn energy. James manned the intake desk, translating Spanglish symptoms with engineer's precision. Dolor de cabeza equals cephalalgia, he murmured, logging migraines. I treated a curanderas diabetic ulcer gangrene threatening her left foot. No mass tortillas, I warned, debriding necrotic tissue. She gripped my wrist, eyes fierce. Usted sana con las manos benditas. The real test came at noon. Sarah, hunched in the waiting line, Haley coughing into her threadbare sling. Walk-in only, James stated gently, avoiding my gaze. Sarah flinched. We're not here for charity. Contagious croup isn't pride compatible, I countered, gloving up. Haley's fevers spiked to 103 degree F, lungs crackling like cellophane. Sarah rocked her, tears cutting trails through makeup. I can't lose her too. In the treatment alcove, I administered racemic epinephrine, nebulizer mist swirling like desert fog. James rigged a humidifier from coffee cans and tubing. Improvised engineering, he explained at Sarah's questioning look. Haley's wheeze softened to a whimper. Pneumonia risk, I warned Sarah, scribbling amoxicillin instructions. Keep her hydrated. Sarah stared at the vial, its cherry scent mingling with bleach. Why help us? James answered first, adjusting his jury-rigged humidifier. Because Emily rebuilds systems, even broken ones. Driving home, sunset gilded the 110 freeway. James gripped my knee. You okay? Pulse stable. Respirations even. He laughed. A rumble deeper than the truck's engine. Diagnosis, chronic compassion. The cabin site welcomed us with chaparral perfume. Moonlight silvered the half-poured foundation rebar bones awaiting flesh. James spread sleeping bags on plywood subfloor. Bedroom's there, he joked, pointing to where scorpions scuttled under tarps. We lay watching stars through the skeleton roof. The Big Dipper hung low Grandma's heavenly ladle. I traced its handle on James's palm. David emailed, begging, self-pity in 12-point font. James turned, his breath warm. Gravity eventually crushes unstable matter. He produced a small velvet box. Inside, not a ring, but a titanium vial pendant. Exact replica of my emergency epinephrine carrier. For your next rescue mission, he murmured, clasping it around my neck. Cold metal kissed my collarbone. Rain woke us. Rare March downpour sluicing through open rafters. We scrambled, laughing, into the truck cab. Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating half-built walls. James sketched ring collection systems on a napkin while I reviewed oncology protocols. Between flashes, he kissed my rain-slick neck, each touch a grounding wire. At dawn, mud slicked the worksite. Sarah's band skidded into the clearing. Haley bundled like a burrito. She spiked another fever, Sarah yelled over the downpour. In the truck's cramped back seat, I assessed retractions, cyanotic lips. Status asthmaticus. James revved the engine. Nearest ears 40 minutes. Too long. My mind raced. Pharmacist's calculus. Albuterol vials in my kit. Sterile water, nebulizer mouthpiece. Hold her, I ordered Sarah. James rigged the truck's power inverter to the nebulizer. As we hurtled toward the highway, I administered continuous albuterol. Tiny lungs fighting. Haley's lips pinked slowly, like dawn bleeding over mountains. At the ear triage, Sarah collapsed into plastic chairs, sobbing relief. James squeezed my hand, titanium vial cool between our palms. You built an IQ in a Ford, he whispered. The discharge took hours. Sarah slept against Haley's crib rails while James drove us home. Sunrise painted the cabin foundation in molten gold. She'll need follow-ups, I murmured, exhaustion weighting my bones. James parked facing the rising sun. So will you. He kissed me deep and slow as light flooded the cab. Through the windshield, the half-built cabin gleamed. Not ruins, but blueprints becoming bedrock. April's whomp carried the scent of orange blossoms and fresh concrete through cedars. Sinai's oncology wing. My rotation began in sterile silence, laminar flow hoods humming like spaceships, IVE poles standing sentinel. Between chemotherapy calibrations, I touched James's titanium vial pendant, cold metal against my collarbone, a secular rosary. Sarah appeared at the pharmacy counter mid-morning. Haley balanced on her hip. The baby's cheeks glowed healthy pink, her breathing clear. Follow-up appointment? Sarah mumbled, avoiding my eyes. She slid a Tupperware across the counter. Still warm conchas. For the cabin crew. James's blueprint poked from her diaper bag. He's teaching me framing, she admitted. Says I swing a mean hammer. Dr. Arroyo approached as Sarah retreated. Your diabetic curandera. Gangrene reversed. She showed me cell regeneration charts, miracles plotted and data points. Your debridement protocol saved her foot. Outside, jacaranda petals snowed violet onto Wilshire Boulevard. Precision begets healing, I thought, loading a cisplatin drip. The call came during shift change, James's voice tight over her noise. Scaffolding collapse. Harold's pinned. I ran, scrubs flapping, pendant bouncing to find chaos. Harold groaned under twisted aluminum, Mrs. Gable shrieking curses at 911. James knelt in rubble, tourniqueting a compound fracture with his belt. Femoral artery nicked, he barked. Pressure here. My hands replaced his blood slick and warm. Harold's pulse thready against my fingertips. Morphine in my kit, I ordered James. 10 mg IV push. Sarah appeared, pale but steady, bracing Harold's head. Breathe, you old fool, she sobbed. Sirens wailed closer. I counted seconds between heartbeats. 8, 12. As James prepped the syringe. Harold's eyes rolled back. Stay with us, Sarah commanded, slapping his cheek. Haley needs her grumpy grandpa. The morphine flowed. His pulse strengthened. At the fluorescent lights revealed the damage. Shattered tibia, lacerated spleen. You bought his life? The trauma surgeon praised, snapping gloves. James's hand found mine blood-crusted knuckles against trembling fingers. Harold's wedding band glinted on the gurney rail as they wheeled him away. Sarah crumpled onto plastic chairs. James retrieved Haley from a nurse, settling her in Sarah's arms. He'll live, he promised. Stubborn men bounce. Sarah clutched his sleeve. Why help him? James nodded to me. Because she taught me, triage doesn't judge. Dawn found us at the cabin site, Sarah sleeping in James's truck with Haley, Harold's stable, and Ichu. We salvaged bent rebar under peach-colored sky. She called him Grandpa, I noted, hefting a twisted beam. James welded sparks into the gloom. Biology's overrated. Family's a build, not a birthright. The next day's blurred. Hospital vigils, pharmacy shifts, nights reviewing Harold's med charts. David's Thegas number flashed once blocked, mid-ring. I archived it with clinical detachment. Pathogen eradicated. Saturday, Sarah arrived at Cedars with framed blueprints. Harold's design, she announced. Wheelchair ramp edition. James studied the angles, elegant, accessible slopes. Overqualified for retirement homes, he approved. We broke ground on the ramp at sunset, Sarah operating the concrete mixer with fierce concentration. Haley babbled in her playpen, waving a tiny wrench. Mrs. Gable distributed tamales from Harold's bedside. He's demanding tequila shots, she reported. Nurse said no. James pressed a cold model into my hand. To unstable matter finding equilibrium. Through the kitchen window, finally installed, our reflections warped in the glass. 3 broken people building something straight and true. Sarah's laugh rang clear as she fixed Haley's crooked sun hat. Look me, huh? Aunt Emily's magic rocks. Later, inventorying controlled substances back at the pharmacy, I found it tucked beside the fentanyl safe, Harold's bent wedding band, polished clean. Sarah's note for your next rescue. Carlos whistled. Karma's got a sense of humor. James found me on the loading dock, the ring glinting in my palm. He wants you to have it, he said softly. Says you're the only woman who ever fixed him right. I slipped it onto my pinky loose, heavy with history, temporary placement. He unfolded blueprints stained with Harold's IV blood. Master bath schematic. Where do you want the compounding lab? Stars emerged above the sodium vapor haze. I pointed to the corner where Venus burned steady. There, with windows facing Jupiter, his kiss tasted of dust and promise. Sarah's headlights swept the alley as she left Haley waving tiny fists at the moon. The ring warmed against my skin, not a shackle but a fulcrum. Balance, I realized, wasn't stillness. It was the constant, precise calibration of falling and rising. May's heat shimmered over the cabin's nearly finished frame, smelling of pine resin and curing concrete. Inside, I calibrated the compounding lab's ventilation system, HEPA filters humming like a spaceship's life support. James passed me a titanium level, his forearm brushing mine. Pharmaceutical-grade airflow achieved, Commander. Sarah arrived with Haley strapped to her back, tool belts crisscrossing her chest. Harold's discharged, she announced, unloading drywall sheets, demanded wheelchair drag races down Cedars, Sinai hallways. Mrs. Gable followed, waving Harold's therapy schedule. Rehabs making him tolerable. Miracle worker, Emily. At the pharmacy, Summer brought heatstroke cases and bee sting panics. Carlos fielded calls while I prepped Harold's anticoagulants. New hire starts Monday, he reported. Sarah Chen, fresh pharmacology grad. James's cousin? Who else builds IV robots for fun? The universe tested that equilibrium on Thursday. A hazmat alert crackled over the paw, chemical spill at the aerospace lab. James's location. My gloved hands froze mid-IV prep saline solution dripping onto linoleum. Titanium doesn't melt. Hydrazine does. Sarah appeared, Haley wide-eyed in her carrier. Jay Appel's locked down. No updates. Her hand trembled, clutching my arm, the same grip from Haley's asthma attack. I handed her Harold's pills. Deliver these, now. In the staff bathroom, I splashed cold water on my neck. James's pendant felt suddenly heavy, a cold weight against frantic pulse. David's voice echoed from some buried chamber. Disasters follow me, M. I silenced it with pharmaceutical precision. Heart rate 102. Respirations 22. Administer logic. Carlos intercepted me at the Pyxis. Ambulances are staging at Griffith Park. They'll triage there. I grabbed the emergency kit. Epinephrine, burn gel, oxygen masks. Cover my shift? His salute held no mockery now. Bring him home. The park swarmed with first responders, a mosaic of flashing lights against parched hills. I found James at Decontamination Station 3, shirtless and soot-streaked, directing engineers through showers. A chemical burn blazed across his ribs, angry red against ash-gray skin. Emily? His voice rasped like sandpaper. Protocol breach coolant valve failed. I gloved up, alcohol wipes biting into the burn. Breathe. Report. He listed casualties while I debrided. 2 critical hydrazine exposure. Evans, stabilized. Dr. Evans. David's golf buddy. Sarah's former prescriber. Karma's web tightened. Under the medical tent's fluorescent glare, I dressed his womb silver sulfadiazine smooth as moondust. His fingers laced with mine, trembling slightly. We contained it. No civilian exposure. Overachiever, I murmured, securing the bandage. His heartbeat thrummed under my palm's steady combustion. Harold's wheelchair approached, propelled by Sarah. Heard you boys needed supervision. Mrs. Gable distributed tamales from a cooler. James accepted one, wincing as he chewed. Burn cream's spicy today. At dusk, we gathered at the cabin. Paramedics, engineers, Sarah stirring pozole over a propane stove. Haley babbled at fireflies in a jar. James traced my collarbone where his pendant lay. You rebuilt the in a meadow. Dr. Evans arrived limping, face blistered under salve. He stared at Sarah, a decade of regret in that glance. Heard you're a carpenter now. Sarah handed him soup, Haley clinging to her jeans. Better than stealing husbands. Later, under stars thick as pharmaceutical dust, James showed me the burn's imprint, a ragged constellation on his skin. Hydrazine scar, permanent reminder. I kissed its edges, salt and antiseptic. We match. my C-section scar from the lost baby pressed against his hip. Harold's wheelchair squeaked as he rolled closer, unfolding blueprints. Ramp extensions done. Now, observatory tower. He pointed to the roof. For Emily's stars, Sarah laughed, bouncing Haley on her knee. Priorities? Wheelchair access before astronomy? Love, Harold declared, is logistical. James's hand found mine under the blanket calluses against compounding scars. Across the fire, Sarah sang to Haley, her voice weaving through coyote howls. The desert breathed around us, sagebrush releasing day's heat, the cabin's bones settling into bedrock. I thought of hydrazine flames and sterile IV drips, of David's banishing act, and the stubborn tribe gathered in the ashes. Survival wasn't clinical precision or controlled burns. It was Sarah's off-key lullaby, Harold's absurd tower, James's steady pulse under my palm. The pendant warmed between us, titanium forged in catastrophe, holding space for light. June's furnace breath baked the desert as the cabin's final trusses locked into place. I stood on the observation deck, Harold's logistical love edition, watching heat mirages dance on the valley floor. Below, James welded the last solar panel bracket, sparks cascading like orange pollen. The titanium vial pendant clung to my sweat-damp skin, a cool anchor against the 100-degree F blaze. At Cedars-Sinai, my oncology rotation culminated in a whispered triumph. Mr. Henderson, the diabetic hiker we'd saved at Vasquez Rocks, in remission. His granddaughter pressed an obsidian arrowhead into my palm during rounds. Curandera stone, she declared, for your new healing place. The pharmacy buzzed with different energy Monday morning. Carlos pinned a Los Angeles Times clipping to the break room wall above the coffee-stained rocket schematics. Local heroes. Section featured James's hazmat team and my field triage photo. Sarah gaped at the headline, Pharmacist and Engineer Avert Disaster. Should have mentioned my drywall skills, she joked, measuring amoxicillin powder. Haley babbled in her playpen, stacking empty vial caps. Mrs. Gable arrived with Harold's wheelchair ramp blueprints framed in reclaimed barnwood. For the cabin's war room, she insisted. An unexpected call shattered the routine. Stanford Medical Center. Dr. Emily Chen, the voice formal, crisp. We're establishing a rural telehealth pharmacy hub. Your disaster response work impressed us. The offer unfolded. Remote supervision of mountain clinics, teaching rotations at the cabin's compounding lab. Salary figures glowed on my screen like controlled substance logs. I found James elbow deep in the cabin's rainwater cistern. Stanford wants me, I blurted, desert dust catching in my throat. He wiped grease across his forehead, leaving a charcoal streak. Teaching? And building something? Bigger? His smile crinkled, sun, raw skin. Told you, catalyst scale. We celebrated with Sarah at the incomplete kitchen island, tamales and modelo negras sweating on plywood. Haley smeared guacamole on Harold's framed blueprints. David called, Sarah admitted suddenly. From Reno wants visitation. James stilled. My fingers found the arrowhead smooth, volcanic. And? Sarah lifted her chin, a gesture I'd never seen before, supervised, at my discretion. The pharmacy's farewell party felt like decommissioning a spacecraft. Carlos presented a Pixis shelf converted into a bookshelf. For your new lab, he rasped, eyes suspiciously bright. Mrs. Rosen brought honey cake, her Auschwitz tattoo peeking under a lace sleeve. Healing, she whispered, is contagious. At dusk, James led me to the observation deck. The desert spread below, coaly cacti casting spindly shadows, the first bats stitching the indigo sky. He pressed a small box into my hands. Inside, not an engagement ring, but a titanium Pharmacist pestle and mortar exact scale replica of Grandma's marble set. For the next generation of combat pharmacists, he murmured. The metal gleamed under rising stars, cold, precise, eternal. Sarah's voice floated out from below, singing a lullaby to Haley. Duermete, mi estrella. Harold's wheelchair creaked in rhythm. The arrowhead warmed in my palm, ancient lava meeting future alloys. The pharmacy's fluorescent lights hummed their final elegy for me. Monday morning, I inventoried narcotics one last time, counting vials with the ritual precision of communion. Carlos watched silently, his usual banter stilled. Outside, jacaranda petals bled purple onto sun-baked asphalt. Sarah Chen arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, James's cousin, her white coat crisp over NASA hoodie. Reporting for duty, Preceptor Chen, she announced, brandishing her newly minted license. Her eyes darted to the framed disaster response article. Pressure's on. Protocols over heroics, I instructed, handing her my master keys. They jingled, a sound that had weighed my pockets for a decade. Mrs. Gable gets extra caramels on Tuesdays. Mr. Delaney needs protein bars before opioid refills. Mrs. Rosen arrived as I packed Grandma's mortar and pestle into cedar shavings. She pressed a sprig of dried sage into Sarah's palm. For the new healer, Her Auschwitz tattoo caught the light, a survivor blessing a successor. At noon, the farewell ritual began. Harold wheeled in a toolbox-turned cake stand, Mrs. Gable's lemon chiffon towering over blister packs. Cardiac arrest risk, Carlos joked, slicing generous portions. Patients clustered, the diabetic curandera with restored foot, teens Sarah once treated for strep, Mr. Henderson beaming remission. Their gifts piled high, obsidian arrowheads, JL patches, a quilt stitched with molecular diagrams. James appeared in grease-stained flight suit, fresh from cabin inspections. He slid Stanford's contract across the counter, my signature bold beneath the dean's. Telehealth Hub launches September 1st, I announced. The cheer rattled prescription bottles. Sarah manned drop-off counter 3 alone when Mrs. Gable's warfarin script arrived. I watched from the waiting chairs, her hands steady, voice clear as she explained entire monitoring. My shadow no longer falls here. The real test came at 3 p.m., David. He hovered near allergy meds, Haley fussing in his arms. Sarah intercepted him, professional armor snapping into place. Supervised visit requires appointment. I just counter 4 handles pickups. She guided him firmly away from my line of sight. To the anti-theft mirror, I saw her assess Haley's weight for amoxicillin dosing. No tremor in her pen. David's shoulders slumped as he left, outmaneuvered by a woman half his age. James squeezed my hand. System stable. At closing, Carlos presented the final gift, my old Pixis shelf transformed into a bookshelf, stocked with pharmacology classics. For Stanford's prodigy, he rasped. We embraced. Brief, fierce, his tears dampening my scrubs. Don't forget us pill counters. Dusk found us at the finished cabin. Solar panels glinted like dragon scales. The observation deck pierced twilight. Inside, my compounding lab gleamed. Stainless steel meeting reclaimed oak. James lit the titanium pestil's lead base. It glowed lunar blue. Your grandmother's wisdom, amplified. Sarah arrived with sleeping Haley, Harold and Mrs. Gable trailing. We crowded the observatory as stars emerged. First Venus, then the summer triangle. James aimed the telescope. Target acquired, Jupiter's great red spot. Through the eyepiece, the storm swirled. Eternal turbulence contained by physics. Haley stirred against my shoulder, milky breath warm on my neck. Sarah traced constellations on Harold's star chart. Teach me the pharmacy ones, M, I pointed. That's mortar and pestle near Scorpio's stinger. And there, the Insulin Nebula. Their laughter rose into the desert silence, a new constellation forming. Later, alone with James under the Milky Way's sprawl, I placed David's last voicemail on speaker. You were right about everything. I'm lost. The words dissolved into static. James stayed silent, his thumb circling my wrist pulse point. I deleted it forever. The titanium pendant warmed between us as coyotes sang in the arroyo. James pressed the pestle into my palm-cold metal meeting calloused history. Ready to calibrate the future. Dr. Bomber. Chen? Below, Sarah sang Haley to sleep in the guest room. Harold's wheelchair creaked across polished concrete. The cabin breathed alive with borrowed breaths and mended hearts. I touched the telescope's cool barrel. Jupiter's storm still raged, beautiful and contained. Some chaos, I realized, wasn't meant to be silenced, only studied with steady hands, then released. Silence in the desert has weight, not emptiness, but the hum of solar converters charging batteries, the tick-tick of cooling metal on the telescope mount, the distant yip of a coyote pack claiming the arroyo. At 4047 a.m., I sit in the compounding lab's glow, reviewing Stanford's inaugural telehealth cases. The titanium pestle rests beside my keyboard grandma's wisdom made indestructible. First consult, a 14-year-old in Bishop, California, self-administering insulin with trembling hands. Scared of needles, her mother whispers via webcam. I adjust the camera angle. See this? I hold up James's nozzle ornament. Rocket part. Holds explosions. You're holding courage. The girl's next injection is steady. James finds me as dawn bleeds rose over the San Gabriels. He places a mug of black tea beside the pestle, steam curling like orbital paths. Day 1, Commander. Patient 1, stabilized. He nods toward the observation deck. Witness required. Outside, Sarah sleeps in the guest room cot, Haley's fist curled around her thumb. Harold's wheelchair sits parked by the rainwater cistern, his therapy walker leaning against it like a sentinel. James unfolds 2 camp chairs facing east. No rockets today, just ascent. The sunrise isn't spectacular. No clouds to catch fire. Just relentless gold scalding the valley floor, igniting quartz and granite boulders. I think of David's last text, Reno's empty, deleted unread. The desert absorbs loss, like sandstone absorbs rain. Sarah stumbles out, Haley on her hip. She demanded stars. She hands me the baby, warm, sleep-scented weight. Haley pats the titanium pendant. Shiny, strong, I correct softly. James produces blueprints. Sarah's addition, South Wing greenhouse. Medicinal plants, aloe for burns, lavender for anxiety. Sarah flushes. Figured your students need labs. Haley grabs the pencil, scribbling over Mojave cartography. Our legacy, a child's wobbly lines over fault zones. At noon, the crisis hits. Harold's monitor alarm shrieks, irregular heartbeat synced to Sarah's panic. I grab the ECG patch while James calms him. Ticker's just excited, old man. The readout flashes, atrial fibrillation. I prep digoxin micrograms measured with lunar landing precision. Sarah holds Harold's hand, humming Cielito Lindo. Stanford pings mid-dose, urgent. Pediatric opiate ode in Lone Pine. I split the screen, left Harold's trembling pulse waveform. Right. A child's blue lips on her feed. Sarah. I've got Harold. Her hands don't shake drawing up the antidote. I guide the ER doc through Narcan dosing, weight calculations scrolling beside Haley's crayon art taped to my monitor. Push slow, I instruct, watching the child's sats climb. Now oxygen, high flow. On the left screen, Harold's rhythm smooths to steady peaks. Sarah wipes his brow. Told you, you'd outlive us all. James serves lunch on the observation deck bean tacos with cactus salsa. Harold sips electrolyte brew. Made Sarah my healthcare proxy, he announces. Figured she's battle-tested. Sarah freezes, taco halfway to her mouth. Haley smears salsa on Harold's blueprints. Wiser than my ex-husband's golf buddies, I approve. Dusk brings David. His rental car kicks dust down our driveway, a disruption in the desert's breath. Sarah moves first, blocking the porch stairs. Visitation Saturday. David's eyes find me. 5 minutes, M. James steps beside Sarah. You're in the launch exclusion zone, pal. I walk out alone. The pendant hangs heavy armor forged in fire. David's biggest hand looks painted over exhaustion. Sarah won't let me near Haley. Sarah protects her tribe. The words land clean, no barbs. You chose orbit. We built gravity. He stares past me to the cabin, Sarah laughing as James lifts Haley to touch a solar panel. Harold cheering from his wheelchair. You rebuilt everything. Better. I turn away. Goodbye, David. Inside, James hands me a cold Modelo. No questions. Sarah presses Haley into my arms. The baby smells of sunscreen and Sarah's lavender soap, a new language of belonging. Later, under stars thick as pharmaceutical dust, I log Stanford's final case, a midwife in 29 Palms needing preeclampsia meds. James adjusts the telescope. Jupiter's moons are dancing tonight. Through the eyepiece, Europa glows icy blue, a frozen ocean hiding life. I think of the Bishop girl's steady hands, the lone pine child breathing pink again, Harold's stubborn heart. Redemption isn't a destination. It's the perpetual calibration of breaking and healing. Haley sleeks against my chest. Her breath synced to my heartbeat. Sarah sketches greenhouse plans. Harold snores in his wheelchair. James's palm rests warm on my neck thumb over the C-section scar. The desert exhales. Sagebrush, ozone, endless possibility. I close my eyes, not counting losses, calculating light years gained. 1 year to the day after David walked out, I stand at the observation deck's railing as dawn ignites the Mojave. Below, the greenhouse Sarah built spills emerald into tope desert, aloe vera spines catching first light like nature's hypodermics. Inside the cabin, James's espresso machine hisses our morning liturgy. Haley's giggles bounce off polished concrete as Sarah chases her with a sun hat. Mi pequeña tormenta. She laughs, capturing the squirming toddler. Stanford's telehealth hub glows awake on my monitor. First case, Mateo, the bishop teen with needle phobia. His screen flickers on, farmland dawn behind him. Finished my rocket, he announces, holding up a soda bottle model. Named it Emily's Resolve. I zoom in. Taped to its side, the titanium nozzle ornament James gave me. Orbital readiness confirmed, I say, reviewing his glucose logs. Steady? Perfect. Harold wheels in. Therapy walker clattering. Tower inspection. He aims a laser pointer at the deck beams. Wind shear tolerance, excellent. Sarah straps Haley into a backpack. Walk the perimeter, abuelo. He salutes, sunlight glinting off his new prosthetic leg. James joins me, pressing a warm mug into my hands. Chai steeped with Sarah's greenhouse lavender. Sent the JBL team your insulin pump redesign. Approved? Like a Saturn V launch. At noon, the desert holds its breath. 100-tell griff. Sarah and Haley nap under swamp-cooled air. Harold charts medicinal herbs. James and I review blueprints for the satellite clinic in Joshua Tree when the alert chimes priority override from Reno. David's face fills the screen. Gaunt. Eyes hollow as dry wells. M. His voice rasps like sandpaper on stone. Relapsed. Vegas cleaned me out. Behind him, peeling motel wallpaper, minibar debris, the pendant grows cold against my skin. Detox center coordinates incoming, I state, fingers already routing resources. Stay, Vincent's has a bed. He flinches. Why help? On the secondary monitor, Mateo's rocket schematic glows. Emily's resolve in bold font, because broken systems deserve recalibration. I transmit the intake forms. Sign them, David, or this call ends. His electronic signature blinks onto the screen. Shaky, but legible. James rests a hand on my shoulder. Grounding, unwavering. Transports arranged, he murmurs. Sarah's cousin does Reno Uber. Dusk bleeds garnet across the valley. We gather on the deck, Sarah stirring pozole, Harold tuning an old radio to mariachi static. Haley toddles to James, clutching Grandma's titanium pestle. Shiny, strong. We correct in unison. I opened David's final email, sent en route to treatment. Saw your cabin on the news. You built a fortress. I built sandcastles. Thank you for the tide. The cursor hovers over delete. James nods. Sarah squeezes my hand. Harold raises his model. To flushing toxic waste. The email vanishes like a comet's tail. Later, under stars thick as salt grains, James adjusts the telescope. Look, Jupiter's great red spot swirls, a perpetual storm contained by physics. Haley sleeps in my lap, her curls damp with desert night. Sarah hums as she repots aloe. Harold's radio finds a frequency. Why to do el cielo fue palante. I touch the pendant, titanium forged in fire, cooled in compassion. David's ghost dissolves into starlight, leaving no scar. Only space. James's palm meets mine on the telescope's barrel. Warmth radiates through calluses and comet dust. Below us, the cabin pulses, a heartbeat of solar converters and Sarah's off-key lullabies. The desert exhales, sage, ozone, infinite quiet. Mateo's rocket soars in my mind, a bottle conquering gravity. I lift Haley higher, her sleepy breath soft on my cheek. Si, mi tormentita, I whisper. Storms make the best navigators. Venus blinks above the horizon, not an endpoint, but a waypoint. James's thumb traces my knuckles, the gesture now as familiar as IV drip calculations. Harold's snore syncs with coyote songs. Sarah's lavender scent weaves through it all. I close my eyes. No more counting losses, only measuring light